Hey everybody, welcome to my channel, That's Ready Homeschool. My name is Mrs. T. Today we're going to be taking a look at Building Foundations of Scientific Understanding, Volume 1. This is meant for grades K through 2nd, and it is written by Bernard J. Nebel. And I am really excited to take a look at this program with you guys. It is something that I selected for our science pick for our kindergarten year last year, and it didn't work out. Truth to tell, I was so overwhelmed by it. But I really wanted to use it because it has so much great content. So we've reselected it for this upcoming school year for first grade, and I've done so much more preparation up into this program. So I wanted to share with you all about the program. We're going to be taking a look in the book, looking at the BFSUcommunity.com, and we're also going to be taking a look inside this other resource, Early Elementary Science Education. And then finally, I will also share with you guys a resource that I created to help supplement and support this program for our current year, which I will be happy to share with you all. So let's just go ahead, let's dive into it. I'm gonna flip you around. Let's talk all about BFSU.
Before we begin, I just want to say, look in the description of the video for timestamps. This is a very long video because it is filled with information, so if there's something specific you want to hop to, just hop onto it. You don't have to watch the whole thing.
Building Foundations of Scientific Understanding is a science curriculum for grades K through 8. And Volume 1, which is what we're looking at now, is intended for grades K through 2nd. So if you start it in kindergarten, it is recommended to be a 3-year program. And if you start it in first grade, they recommend it being a 2-year program. It was written by Bernard J. Nebel, and this is not written from a Christianity perspective. Now, at the very beginning of this book, they have what are called orientations and information about online support and participation. And I want to highlight that they reach out, or they call out a website here called BFSUcommunity.com, which we will take a look at in this video here. Orientation number 1 is going to talk about the essence of science and how BFSU is really focusing on driving home the fact that science is way more than just learning and memorizing scientific terms and facts, and that science and scientific information is always derived from observation, questioning, and logical reasoning. So throughout BFSU, those 3 skills are what's going to be practiced by your children. They're going to learn to observe, learn to question, and learn to come to logical conclusions. Now, orientation number 2 is going to have their FAQ, which I highly recommend looking through. They do answer a lot of stuff in here. But one of the questions I want to highlight is they answer the question, how much preparation is needed? Now, they indicate that users report that they do have to read over the lesson prior to its presentation and highlight or make notes of key points. Then they have to make sure they have all the materials on hand, and oftentimes kids want to help with that. But beyond that, their recommendation is just to start. Not be concerned with presenting the lesson perfectly, if there's any such thing, and to just dive in. Now, I did try this approach, and for my personality, it did not work very well. But we're going to talk a little bit about the preparation that I did that makes me feel a little bit more comfortable. All right, orientation number 3 is going to go over the teaching according to how students learn. And I'm not going to go into a lot of details here, but it goes over different principles that highlight how students learn and why they considered these principles when building this curriculum. So I found it a very interesting read, and I highly recommend taking a look at that. Orientation 4 is all about guiding your students to think, because there is a difference between just memorizing facts and then thinking for yourself. And they have this concept here of turning on the mill of thinking and maintaining an atmosphere open to questions and exploration. And what I do like about this particular section is they show you all the different kinds of questions that you might get and the different responses that would be a healthy and engaging way to respond to questions. Your children should be asking questions when they are learning. They shouldn't just take what you say at face value. And this talks all about the kind of questions that you may get as a parent or teacher. Okay, Orientation number 5 is called the Baloney Detection Kit, and in here it really highlights that beginning level elementary students are prone to blend and sometimes confuse imagination with reality. They're also prone to accept prejudices and accept certain false beliefs as fact. So what they have here is what they call their baloney kit, and it is developing this skill of mind that will enable students to eventually be able to catch the fallacies that they see themselves. So we have a bunch of different, I would say, points here that we need to be aware of. And the conclusion of the baloney kit here is that you as the teacher need to be watchful and alert for any of the logical fallacies coming up in the course of the discussion or anywhere else, and that each occurrence provides a teachable moment for emphasizing the point of logic. Now, what I find amazing about the baloney kit is it's so relevant beyond just science, especially in today's world. So I found that to be very helpful, and I'm excited to have this mind of the baloney kit in the back of my mind when I approach just my life in general. Orientation number 6 is going to talk about BFSU learning progressions. So progression A is going to be all about the nature of matter. So it's going to talk about how that's organized. Progression B is life science. C is physical science, engineering and technology. And D is earth and space science. So it's going to kind of walk you through that flow. Maybe flow is the wrong word, but going through that progression. Orientation is going to give you, number 7 is going to talk all about the BFSU lesson and how it's broken down, which we are going to hop over to an example here in just a little bit. And then orientation 8 is going to be all about following the flow chart. Now this flow chart here, as you can see, is very, we'll just say has a lot of information in it. And when I first saw this, I was a little bit overwhelmed. Now I'm going to recommend and link in the description of this video Bernard J. Nebel's own YouTube video where he talks about this flowchart and how BFSU is meant to be used. It's really worth a watch. But ultimately, what you're going to be doing is you're going through these 4 different areas or these 4 pillars, but you're going to be moving left to right. So for example, you can see AB1. After you complete that, you can move to the right to B2. You could also start A2, but the idea here is you want to kind of hop around. And if you look at this B column here, you really don't want to do B3 until you have finished C1, and you don't want to do B3, or excuse me, and you don't want to do C2 on the following column until C1 is done, and so on and so forth. So the easiest way to do this is right to left, kind of circle through these 4 columns, but ultimately this is an extremely flexible program. It is not meant to be rigid, so you go in the order that you want to go in. Now let's go over to a lesson here, and we are going to break down every single section. So the format of BFSU lessons is going to be the same throughout every single lesson here. It first is going to start with an overview, and the overview is going to have a brief summary of the ideas and concepts that your students will confront in the lesson. Underneath that, we have a time required, and it's a rough estimate of time that it's going to take for you to present the core of the lesson. But you need to remain flexible, and you also need to be aware that this was kind of estimated based on a classroom setting. So your child's curiosity, the fact that you are doing it with your kid, kind of maybe one-on-one or in a smaller group, will mean that those time estimates may or may not be fully accurate for your setting. One thing to keep in mind about the time required is that it does not include the time necessary for bringing students up to speed before introducing new material, so any review, and it does not include time for items that are listed in later sections in the questions, discussions, and activities. So those are going to be very important, but they're not included in the time required section. So you'll need to count on scheduling additional time for those activities. All right, underneath the time required, next we have practices, and that's going to be a listing of what we expect students to be able to do upon the mastery of the lesson. So these are going to be your ultimate aims or your goals at the end. This is like used for purposes of assessment and to ensure that your child understands. Required background is going to list the preceding lessons that you had to do before you were ready for the lesson at hand. And it's important that you finish these stepping stone lessons before you just hop into higher level things, for example. Below that, we have materials, which are just materials needed. Teachable moments. This is interesting. So learning is most efficient and meaningful when it pertains to what we are involved in at the time. So this section presents ideas that you as the teacher can do to draw students' interest toward the lesson before launching into it. All right, and then we get into the methods and procedures. So methods and procedures, I would say, is the bulk of the lesson. This is the teaching. This is where it's going to be broken down into different parts. It's going to show you what you are going to actually be exploring and teaching. It will have guides and discussions. And within this, you're going to see many what they call signposts that direct you to ask certain questions or provide think time. These are going to be opportunities to guide your students in interpreting observations and reaching rational conclusions. This is where they'll be practicing the essence of science. They're practicing their observation, experiencing their questioning, and then coming to conclusions through logical reasoning. Underneath that, we have questions, discussions, activities to review, reinforce, expand, and assess learning. So learning becomes long-term and facilitates thinking only if it's applied to different examples and used in reasoning and problem solving. So this section provides a list of things that you can do to bring students to review, reflect on, and apply their learning to keep it alive and growing. So this list is not meant to be all-inclusive. You can add or substitute ideas, but one thing to note is they have a section here almost in every single lesson that says make a paper fold book or record in science notebooks. And it's a recurring directive. It is for writing. The assignment for writing is extremely important part of learning, and it brings the students to reflect on and reinforce what they learned. It also exposes misunderstandings, which can be corrected, and it provides an avenue toward helping students to develop their own writing skills. Now, this is so important, but at my child's current level and our age, I was really hoping to have this set up with some more guided practice rather than just having an empty notebook. So we will go over what I have created to help support that. Now, the second recurring and important item that you'll see in this section are going to be this thing where it's like in small groups, pose and discuss questions such as, and this Q&A is so beneficial. And this is something that he emphasizes. It's really important that you take full advantage of that Q&A. Below that, we have to parents and others providing support. Obviously, we are homeschooling, so we don't have to take much advice from this particular section. But then after that, we have books for correlated reading. Now, this is going to be a listing of grade-appropriate children's books that pertain to each lesson. And having kids read these will provide several important advantages, but the list is not required. And any one or more of these titles or alternative titles will provide the same benefit. So it's important to expose your child to these scientific topics through literature. But if you don't have these, don't feel like, in your library doesn't have them, don't feel like you have to buy these exact books. You can get a huge benefit from very similar books that will be available elsewhere. All right, so let's go ahead and just flip through the rest of the book so you can see the rest of these lessons, and we'll hop on to the next resource. All right, the next thing that I want to kind of look at with you guys is early elementary science education. This is a small guide that was written by Shannon Jordan with Dr. Bernard J. Neville, so with the creator of BFSU. And I just want to highlight this one because this is a really good resource and this really helped. Now, at the very beginning of this book, there's a preface, and in there, she basically says that she discovered BFSU and she knew she had a gem and she loved the material and the methodology and the deep understanding it imparts, but she felt there was too much preparation required. So she actually has done a lot of this preparation for us. This book includes a suggested order of lessons, which is, again, a suggestion. You do not have to do any of this in this order, but this worked for her, and it's broken out to cover 2 years. So you'll see year 1 will go from autumn to spring, and year 2, autumn to spring. After that, you'll have a section for preparing each lesson. Again, she even highlights bfsucommunity.com, which we will talk about here very shortly. And she kind of says like what you should do before. So before the new term begins, gather everything that you need, print the charts, research online links, etc. A week or 2 before each lesson, you want to read the lesson in BFSU. You can review this abridged guide. You can decide upon additional books and think about ways that you can also expand upon the lesson. And then on the day of the lesson, she recommends pulling out the supplies you need and then gathering any of the other things that you may need around the house. So it's actually really good advice, and I found that having it all on one page makes it just feel so much less overwhelming. Now, if you go based on her suggested order of units, she did create master supply lists for these terms. So she did break that all out for you. Additionally, there is a page here or a chart of lesson supplies. So you can see easily if you needed to go to a different lesson, you can see what is needed, printed items, online links, etc. There's important information for preparing for D6, but beyond that, all of these other lessons are organized in the same way. So there's going to be an overview and an objective and a gather section at the very top of each lesson. And that's just going to show you what, kind of give you the overview, right? What are the goals? And this is a good summary of the content in BFSU. It is then broken down into parts, which again correspond to BFSU. And the bolded part here are going to be questions that you can verbatim ask your children to help spark conversations. And I really do enjoy the fact that it's a really easy way to have these conversations without a lot of preparation. So you have that done per part, and then in the conclusion part, she'll also provide additional activities. So let's just do a quick flip through so you can see the rest of this content in this book, and then we'll move into bfsucommunity.com. Okay, so here's bfsucommunity.com. You can register for free in here, which is really wonderful. They have a lot of open discussion and forum pages for you to look out. But what I want to highlight is if you scroll down on this homepage, you will have this big grid here. If you click into volume 1, it is actually going to show you a lot of amazing content. This has an all-inclusive material list that people have posted and generated. We have a flowchart of learning progressions, and each learning progression is going to have their own lessons. Now let's just go ahead and click on A3. This is just a random lesson here. And you can see the kind of information that people have loaded. So we have a slide deck, for example, that was created by a user that's going to go all into the details of the lesson. So when you are teaching this, you could easily take a look at this slide deck that has been proposed and make your way through this with your children. How cool is this, you guys? This is a lot of additional prep that is there. It's already ready, so that's excellent. So we've got slide decks, which is lovely. We have lists of extra readings, for example. Let's go ahead and open up this one so you can see. So we have some extra readings that have been added. We have worksheets that people have created. Let's see if this one works. Nope, not that one. Let's try this one. Here we go. So you can see what some people have created for this lesson. And there's just so much content in here. A lot of these lessons also include links to photos. Here we go, Earth's atmosphere that you can see through photos in outer space. So you don't have to go Googling and finding all this information. There are so many things out there that are readily available and searches that have been created for you. Now, I did decide that I wanted a little bit more more preparation, so I didn't have to look in the midst of the year and create like worksheets or notebooking pages, but I felt like my child needed a little bit more help with notebooking. Now, the first thing that I want to kind of point out is I was given some really good advice here on YouTube from one of my listeners or watchers who recommended joining a Facebook group. And I'll put the Facebook group here on the page. Inside this Facebook group, a number of parents have shared different resources that they use to support a successful implementation of BFSU. And in there was a page that was from a blog post. I will try to make sure I clearly state where all this is from, where a parent had gone through and they had created their own notebooking pages and workbook pages to support BFSU. Now, it was not secular. There were definitely references to Christianity embedded within that, but I actually took great inspiration from that, and I did use some of the resources that were inside that page. It ended up being extremely valuable. So thank you for reaching out and sharing that information. But I created my own pages here through Google Docs, and I ended up printing out these. And throughout the year, what we are going to do is use these as a guided way to notebook, observe, and guide us to critically think through the topics that we are working through with BFSU. Now, my ultimate goal here in this year is to cover, we're not going to be doing all of BFSU in 1 year. We are going to be doing it in 2 years. And what we are going to do is take about 4 weeks not 4 weeks. We're going to be taking about 2 weeks for a single topic on average. Now, some of these topics we will be able to finish before 2 weeks, but rather than rushing through them, what we will do is we'll just have fewer science focused days for those topics, and then days that we are going to, or lessons that are going to be more in-depth, a little bit more complicated, we were going to, during those weeks, just introduce a few extra science focused times. So we're going to be going through this notebooking in conjunction with our teaching. And I'm very excited about that.
All right, so all this said and done, there are basically 5 preparation steps, if I had a simplified way of approaching this, that I prepared for BFSU for this upcoming year. Step number 1 was reading BFSU orientation pages and really becoming familiar with the program. I watched Bernard J. Nipples' how-to video, which was extremely insightful. I read through those orientation pages, and I also looked at the preface and the information from Early Elementary Science Guide, and just really understanding how it was intended to be used was very helpful. It actually really relieved a lot of the overwhelming feelings that I was experiencing. For me, step number 2 was determining the lessons and the order that we wanted to do the lessons for the school year. And a lot of my inspiration did come from early elementary science education, but I did embrace the flexibility of this program, and we did adjust which lessons we wanted to do. So there are some tweaks. It is not identical to early elementary science education guide. For me, step 3 was actually acquiring the materials that we needed, and I grabbed the overall list of materials from Early Elementary Science Education Guide, and I also cross-referenced it to bfsucommunity.com's materials list that they have listed on that website. Step 4 was actually going to that website and exploring the resources that I wanted to use. I grabbed some slide decks from here, I grabbed some photos from here, and I actually downloaded them all and I loaded them to a Google Drive. So that way, come time for us to actually do our teaching, it's all in one stop for me, one area, and I don't have to worry about hopping back and forth or remembering which lessons I have slide decks and which ones I don't, so on and so forth. I found it being very helpful to have all of that kind of ready to go for my personality. And then finally, step 5 was creating and printing my own notebooking pages. Now, when it comes time to implement it, when we're actually teaching, I broke it down into 5 simple steps how I will approach each lesson. Step number 1 is actually preparing the lesson. So this is re-reviewing BFSU, pulling the supplies that we need, making sure if am going to be pulling any books from the library, for example, putting those on hold, etc. So just being prepared for that lesson. Number 2 is actually teaching the lesson. So I'll be using BFSU Community slide decks where applicable, and I will be really focusing on early elementary science scripted discussions to help guide me with my teaching for the actual lesson. After we finish teaching the lesson, we will go through the discussion questions from BFSU and any supporting materials that we're going to pull, like correlated readings, for example. Then step 4 will be that notebooking phase. This is where we're going to complete the prepared pages that I've worked on. And then at the end of the final part for every lesson in early elementary science guide, they have a science journal prompt. We will be doing those on just notebook pages as part of, like, together as a group. So it will be additional science journaling as well. And then finally, we will be doing a verbal assessment, and those verbal assessment questions are going to be pulled directly from BFSU and or early elementary science guide.
All right, you guys, and that is it. I know that was a huge amount of content, but I hope you found it to be very helpful. Check out the description in the video. I've outlined everything that I've talked about, from the Facebook group to bfsucommunity.com to where you can buy the book, the website, everything that I mentioned here, even that blog post from, not blog post, the forum that was from the Well-Trained Mind discussion forum, that's also in the description. Now, if you are interested in seeing the notebooking pages that I have created, I have also made this readily available to you. Please be sure to read my disclaimer at the beginning of the document, but I did put it in the description as well as in a pinned comment. Well, thank you so much. Comment down below. Let me know what you think, and I will talk to you guys soon. Bye, everyone.